The episode opens with a strange, almost ant farm looking cross-section of the dungeons, the sprawling, impossibly large to comprehend complex of tunnels and caverns and everything in between that lies below the surface of the roomlands of the Colostle and makes up the dungeons. Then the view sort of splits into 16, like a 4x4 grid of different screens, and it slowly zooms in on one and then zooms out and zooms in on another, and each of these follows a rookling that has, through whatever natural or unnatural process, has begun beckoning rooklings down deeper into the dungeons. We see them wandering alone. They travel much like Sybil and other Roomlanders down in the dungeons. They wander these halls, these caverns, these tunnels. Some of them make it. Some of them don't. We see them fall off of bridges to shatter in the far reaches of the floor of the cavern below. We see others that are using their abilities to bypass obstacles, and eventually we see one reach the Rookling Forge that Sybil and her friends have just recently made it to, but this is way before they get there. And then slowly more and more begin arriving until this enormous cavern is almost filled with rooklings. The cavern itself is spherical in shape, and the floor of it has many stalagmites that are growing up out of the ground. It looks like a ton of spikes that have accumulated, but one stands way above any of the others, and it is much taller. It is right in the center of this cavern, and there is a natural slope and platform that rises to the very center of this cavern and approaches the tip of that stalagmite, which is just below the largest stalactite that hangs down from the ceiling of the cavern. Again, much larger than any of the others that loom over anyone in this cavern from the ceiling. And the two of them almost meet. There is a few feet of gap between them. And there is some strange, powerful pull at this location. And this is the Rookling Forge. We see rooklings form an orderly line to approach this powerful location. And when they do, many of them turn and walk right back out of the cavern. We once again zoom out to that grid of different views of different rooklings on their journeys, and now even more are venturing around the dungeons. Many, again, don't make it. Maybe they are infected with rook rot, or crushed or taken in by another rook, or maybe spectral rooks do something and we just see them not return to this cavern. But the rare few that do return with rookstones. And when they return and they approach this connection, this place between the stalactite and stalagmite, the rookling itself and the rookstone that it has brought, we see for the first time the transformation that occurs. A powerful, maybe gravity or sort of just aura begins to pulse around the rookling and the rookstone that it has brought here. In this moment, other rooklings back up and give it space as they are pulled, rookling on the bottom, just resting perfectly balanced atop the stalagmite, and the rookstone almost magnetically pulled to the tip of the stalactite hanging from the ceiling, and then the two of them begin glowing and then spinning, and they actually leave touching the top and bottom of the stalactite and stalagmite, and they begin spinning around one another in a horizontal circle around these 2 points, and it gets bright and the light gets so intense that all of the Rooklings, if they'd had eyes, some maybe do, and they shield them, and it is intense, and then it's so powerful there's almost an audible thrumming, and the gravity, the pressure in this cavern feels so great. All of these Rooklings are staring up at it, and then the next thing we know, there is a flash of light, and almost like a horizontal shockwave that goes out, caught and held within this cavern, and then standing on that platform before these 2 stalactite stalagmite, this Rookling Forge, is a new Rookling, and it is different than it was before. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Colossal Dungeons here on the Rene Plays Games podcast. Pretty sure this is going to be the penultimate episode, which means that we will have 1 episode in March to close up Colossal Dungeons, and then we will be moving on to the next series, probably in April. I'll probably do a 1-player one-shot in March, which is also a 5-week month, so there's likely to be a bonus episode and a few other things that are just going to make March a little bit of a buffer month for me before I jump into another series, which, as we talked about before, is going to be shorter than Colossal Dungeons. I'm not going to do like a 10-episode series, most likely. I'm going to do like a 4 or 5-episode series so I can play more games this year, probably try and get to like 3 or 4 quote-unquote main series this year. Closing out February, we're going to have the second Design Diaries episode of 2026, and it's going to be character generation in my biggest design endeavor ever with my friend Christian from the DMs After Dark. I'm going to be doing character creation in our Gardens of Rust game, and that way you'll get a little bit of a feel for what character creation feels like, but also the options you're going to have and how the gameplay works with characters during the player phase of that game. I think I'm going to do little vignettes of maybe solo AP, but like really small scale stuff, just to kind of give people an idea of how it feels. And maybe we will have an update in the next month episode of that. We'll see. And yeah, we'll see what's coming out. We're getting wild this year. We're going to do things a little bit differently. Oh, and don't forget, next Monday is also my second Twitch stream. So if you want to come hang out in chat with me about stuff on Twitch, it's just me hanging out with people for an hour and a half, and we're going to move Mining Media there, talking about Glenn Cook's The Black Company. I have thoughts, but also, you know, that's where we're going to discuss some behind the scenes stuff with Colossal. So if you want to talk about Colossal, come chat with me. We'll talk about maybe ideas for the upcoming One Ring game, maybe what I would play for a 1-player one-shot in March, design stuff, lots of ideas. So come hang, but in the meantime, I hope that you enjoy this episode of Colossal Dungeons. Okay, well, first thing I do need to say is that if you have the Dungeons book and you're playing Colossal and you're playing in the dungeons, you're going to realize that what I just described does not sound like a Rookling Forge as it is presented in the book. And you know what? That's how these games go. I'm making this one much more mysterious and natural than the ones that are presented in the book, which are these big metal, seemingly human-made contraptions and machines that will transform a Rookling. Instead, I'm doing this to maybe be something more like a ley line or a point somewhere in the Colossal that holds great natural power. And this is just what it is pushing and trying to do, or what the Rooklings, the natural order of Rooks and Rooklings and things like that, are doing with it. We described last time that Sybil, Zorn, and the 3 now Rooklings had arrived here at the Rookling Forge after meeting an NPC who was meditating under an underground waterfall, showed them the way. We're going to ignore that NPC for the moment and just discuss what happens next. And again, fair warning, listeners who are interested in Colossal's canon dungeons. I'm going way off book for this. As Sybil and her companions walk into this large cavern where the Rookling Forge is, we see it unlike we saw it in the introduction, and we see it full of Rooklings. They have industriously built little platforms and areas among the stalagmites. There is that natural path and sort of platform that rises, and now that I'm thinking about it, I actually love the idea that maybe there is a series of stalagmites that grow larger, and they have created, or there has been like almost like a spiral sort of walkway that leads up towards the tallest one, which is the one that nearly meets that stalactite that hangs down from the ceiling. And there are Rooklings everywhere. They're coming and going. They don't really seem to acknowledge Sybil or Zorn or the other Rooklings all that much. They all seem to be preoccupied doing something. Now remember that the Rookling that we have, the little spherical guy, he doesn't feel the pull for some reason to this room. So he's just sort of rolling around. The other two are Ice Rookling that Sybil has still not named, and the Rookling Revolving both felt a pull or knew where this place was. And I'm just going to flip a card for the Oracle, one for each of them, to see if maybe they are preoccupied, or maybe it's even pulling them away from Sybil and Zorn. First, let's do our Ice Rookling friend. That is a 6 of diamonds, which I believe is just a straight no. Yeah, so our Ice Rookling friend is here and has felt that pull, right? We've said that from the beginning. He has felt that pull, but something about his proximity or bond maybe with Sybil is allowing him to ignore this. What about Rookling Revolving? Ooh, that is a 4 of spades, so black cards are yeses. So that means yes, he is distracted at the moment by the pull of whatever this forge, this Rookling Forge, is asking these Rooklings to do, which, as we saw in the intro, is go get Rookstones and bring them back. But a 4 is a low enough card that there is a complication with this, and I wonder what that could be. I'm going to flip a card on the Story Generator Oracles and just see if the twist makes sense. A 7, which we've never gotten before, and it says a dark secret. Huh. Okay. We're going to come back to that, but I think I have an idea for what that Rookling might get up to. Zorn is going to start talking to all of these Rooklings to attempt to figure out what it is they're here to do, if he can find any common threads among what they're being tasked with and what they experience when they go up to the forge itself and all of this stuff. And so he's going to be taking a little bit of time to do that. I think that Sybil and the Ice Rookling, and we will say the Rookrot Sphere Rookling as well, are going to walk up to the forge itself to get a better look. When they arrive near the top, the Ice Rookling maybe stops and even like puts his hand up in front of Sybil in a sort of maybe we shouldn't get closer kind of gesture. And she looks down at him and she says, "Hey, you okay? You don't have to come over here if you don't want. It's I don't know why, but this place." And then she feels the weight of her Whisperstone, Rookstone, sort of pulling again towards this central area, this forge. And the phase stone in her hand that she's pulled out, almost unaware she was even doing so, is also reacting to this somehow. And she's looking around at it, and the Ice Rookling does his best to prevent her from going forward. And I think Sybil stays nearby with him for a second. The Rookrot Rookling is just kind of rolling around in circles, and I think Sybil is going to see another Rookling come forward with a rookstone. And it's not a unique rookstone, it is just a, we'll say, rumble rookstone that they bring forward. And they stand before, for lack of a better term, the precipice, this altar before the stalagmite that they will be laid upon, and the stalactite that this rumble rookstone is going to be affixed to like a magnet pointing down towards the rookling. And they observe the process of a transformation. The rookling that approached before it positioned itself on the stalagmite was a pretty basic looking turret lightning rookling. It almost looked like a little lightning rod, and it puts the rumble rookstone on the stalactite and positions itself, and then the spinning and the bright light and the shockwave occurs. What emerges is not an electric lightning rookling or a rumble rookling. It is still that kind of cylindrical shape, but now it is what is known as a verdant rookling, and it has vine-like roots that come out of it. And it's not rook rot. It is not the same as that. It is very different, and this rookling, I think a lot of the other rooklings in the chamber all clap or do some form of cheering as this one descends the path again and is totally changed. I'm going to flip a card to see if Sybil and the ice rookling and or the rook rot rookling saw anything interesting here. Ooh, that is a 10 of clubs, which I think is high enough. It is, yes, with a bonus. Okay, so during this transformation, at first it is a bright light between them, and then it is a spinning, and then it almost is like a perfect circle, the entire diameter, this thin line of a diameter right between those 2 points of the stalactite and the stalagmite. It's like a circle of light is just spinning as this transformation occurs. And Sybil and the rooklings do have to cover their eyes, but I think what they see in the immediate aftermath, almost like if you look at something bright and you kind of close your eyes a bunch of times, there's like an after image kind of burned in for a few seconds. I think that what Sybil and the rooklings see is this process, this spinning, has spun and created a spectral chain that falls from the walls of this cavern into somewhere else. With nothing else to do, I think that the ice rookling looks a little unsettled by this, and Sybil's not sure she wants to use this Rookling Forge. She's still not sure, like, why did it bring us here? What could be important? And that's when Zorn comes, I'm not going to say rushing, but walking briskly up the trail towards Sybil. And he says, "I have news, but I don't think it's going to be something we particularly want to hear." Zorn explains that the call that is bringing all of the rooklings here is less of a call, like an audible or even in their head kind of beckoning, summoning or something like that. Instead, it's more of they're being pulled here. Physically, but again, not physically, by something similar to maybe the chains that are connected to these spectral rooks. Then Sybil explains to Zorn what she just saw during that transformation, that a chain was forged upon a rookling undergoing the process of whatever this forging is. Unsure of what to do, Sybil and Zorn both know that everything they've been doing lately seems to point towards there is something about these spectral chains that needs to be stopped, but they're not sure how to do that. But they just found a place where chains are forged. Does that mean that there is now a new spectral rook somewhere? And if that is the case, Sybil wants to stop that. Zorn looks around the room full of Rooklings. And he expresses that he doesn't think these Rooklings know what it is they're doing. They're being called here much like the spectral rooks are unwillingly chained. There is something that is controlling all of this. And Sybil looks at Zorn and says, then why do I have a rookstone that prevents them from attacking me? Why do I have a rookstone that allows me to phase into their plane of existence? Why do I have a spear that can cut through their chains? What does it all mean? Zorn looks and says, I don't know, but we need to find where these chains lead. And I think this time, the Ice Rookling actually turns, reaches up, and grabs Sybil's hands. And they are cold in Sybil's hands. She kind of starts to pull away, but then realizes that it's trying to tell her something important. And then it cups its hands in front of her, like asking for something. And she looks at him and says, I don't understand. What do you mean? And it turns and it points at the forge, and then it points at the phase stone in Sybil's hands. And she immediately reacts, no, of course not. One, this rookstone could be what we need to meet them where they are, to be able to help them. And then he points to her spear, which can cut through the chains. And she says, yes, but I can't ask you to do that. And the Rookling just holds his hands out, cupping them again. And she says, we don't even know how this process works. It doesn't mean it's going to be you when you come back. It doesn't mean this stone is going to give you what you need. And the Rookling shrugs and looks at Zorn, and Zorn looks at Sybil, and no one has the answer. But I think Sybil looks at the Ice Rookling and says, Why are you doing this for me? It points at Sybil, and it points at itself, and it just puts its hand over its chest. And Sybil purposefully, I think, looks away, avoids eye contact, and Zorn can see it on her face where she's like, damn it. I don't want... And then she looks back at the Ice Rookling and says, you're going to make me say it, aren't you? And it nods. And she says, I don't want to lose you. But the Ice Rookling holds its hands out again. And I believe that this is where Sybil is going to reluctantly... She takes the Rookling's hand in her own, and they begin walking up towards this forge. And she's going to stand right next to it as she hands little Ice Rookling, still unnamed, the phase stone, and is going to be right there when it attempts to use the forge to change. Again, big ol' disclaimer for those of you who are playing Colossal or want to play in the dungeons. Don't worry, no spoilers for this part. I am breaking the rules. The rules for the Rookling Forge do say that it does not work with any unique rookstones, but for the purposes of our story, and because I will not be doing the final chapter as presented, so you can feel comfortable playing the dungeons yourself and doing the campaign as presented, because there is a final chapter, mine is not going to follow that kind of ending. Sybil hands the phase stone to the Ice Rookling. It reaches up, and the phase stone shakes for a second and then is pulled to the tip of the stalactite hanging down. And then the Ice Rookling awkwardly climbs and then balances itself on the top of the stalagmite. And for a moment, Sybil's worried it's not going to work. But then, unlike the previous forge transformation, there's almost a initial shockwave in the cavern as there's a rumble and some little bits of rock and dust and whatnot fall from the ceiling and all of the stalactites that are hanging there. And I think all of the Rooklings look up. They always do when a Rookling enters the forge with a Rookstone, but this time I think they are less excited for what they've seen over and over a few times at least now, and more intrigued and maybe worried about what is about to happen. I'm going to flip a card to see if this goes as intended or not. The intention being that we are going to transform our Ice Rookling friend with a type of power that will make it like a mini spectral Rookling. It's going to be a mini spectral Rook, but a Rookling. And Sybil can break the chain. And then we can hold it and we can go follow it down. Let's see if this works. Oh no. That is a 2 of hearts, which is a no, and it's worse than you think. Oh no. Our little Ice Rookling friend. The light begins to shine. The forge begins to do what it does. I think that this Rookstone is not one it ever anticipated being in the Rookling Forge. Our Ice Rookling friend begins to spin. The light begins to thin out into that thin horizontal line that spins around the entirety of the cavern. And there's a nova-like light and shockwave, as always. And stepping down from the stalagmite is a brand new Rookling. Except this one doesn't look like it should have taken on any of the Phase Stone's qualities. This just looks like another Rookling. And Sybil is looking at the Rookling and kneels down and she's like, "Is it you? Are you back?" And the Rookling just walks right by her. And she turns and she's like, "No." And Zorn puts his hands up to Sybil to stop her and says, "That is not the same Rookling." And then I think this is where we see Rookling revolving as it floats up and then flies towards the edge of the cavern. And we see spectrally a chain falling down towards the floor of the cavern. And at the end of this chain is our Ice Rookling friend in spectral form as it falls down. Ooh, that would have been such a good cliffhanger, but we have more episode to go. And if this is the penultimate episode, we got to get down there and we got to find out where our little friend has gone and how we're going to get them back. So let's find out. So what do you say we do one more exploration phase to track down our now lost spectral Ice Rookling friend and get him back? All right, we're going to do one more exploration phase and just say that we probably get to where we're going unless something goes terribly wrong. So let's find out. Our exploration score is back to full. So that means we'll be flipping 3 cards to see what we get here. We get a 9 of hearts, an 8 of clubs, and a 3 of hearts. This is crazy. These 3 cards, I feel like, work so well for a final leg down into the dungeons to find our missing friend. The 9 of hearts is a labyrinth. Just a 10-card labyrinth, but a labyrinth nonetheless, so we get to do a labyrinth. That will obviously come last. The 8 of clubs says a flooded area writhing with life. Seems interesting. And then the 3 of hearts is a friendly NPC key to your calling, which for Sybil was always about unique Rookstones. But I think that this is going to represent the change in Sybil's calling. It says maybe they have a clue about what you're looking for, or they block your way. Because they're friendly, they're going to have a clue. My thought is this isn't even going to be really an NPC or a person. Let's just slow down and let's go ahead and think about this story-wise, fictionally, narratively, how this goes. Sybil and Zorn and the now two Rooklings, the spherical Rookrot Rookling and Rookling Revolving, are rushing out of the cavern where the Rookling Forge they've been looking for so long has been. And Zorn is satisfied. One, he knows where it is, and two, he got a little bit more information about it, but he is doing his best to keep up with Sybil, who is pushing herself very, very hard. She just keeps going. It is not a pace that is really maintainable, and he's worried she's going to burn herself out, but she just keeps pushing harder and harder. And eventually they come into a massive cavern, or huge just underground area that is, I want to say, the flooded area says here that there's a waterfall, and it can either be totally still or writhing with life. And I think that this is an underground lake with a waterfall, and it flows out, and there's a clear course that courses through the stone and is steadily eroding it all away. And it's not immediately obvious that there's a way across, but Sybil just does not stop moving, and she's exhausted. There is so much life down here that even days ago would have been so important for her to stop and look at and learn about. Now, her friend, who she has neglected to call such or name or anything this entire time, is missing, is gone, and it's all she cares to figure out. Zorn, I think, forces her to stop. Let's see if we get a 10 of hearts, which is a no, but with an upside. He does not get her to stop, but they do manage to refill their water skins, and this may be where the NPC is that helps us along our calling. Sybil is fighting with Zorn about she can't stop. There's no time. If we stop now, we're never going to find him. Then standing there, like in the middle of the water, is a spectral rook. And it looks at Sybil, and Zorn stops in his tracks, and the Rooklings stop as well and are staring at it. And it does not approach violently or angrily. It simply holds up its own chain, and it turns, and it just starts pulling it so that way Sybil can follow. That's all they needed. That adrenaline and hope fuels them as they move forward. And finally, it leads them towards a location, but there's a labyrinth in the way. And we are going to flip 10 cards to get through this labyrinth, which will eventually lead us to wherever these spectral chains are tethering these spectral rooks within the dungeons. Let's flip 10 cards and make this interesting. So I have decided to go with a straight line. Unlike my previous labyrinths where I tried to get interesting with branching paths and things like that, this one is not a branching path. It is just getting through this labyrinth. Reminder of the labyrinth rules: we have 10 cards face down, and we are going to flip them one at a time. At the very end will be the guardian of this labyrinth, which I think is obviously going to be something a little more than just your usual guardian. There's usually a reward, but at this point we are in narrative endgame, so I'm worried less about the mechanical flipping of a card for a reward and more about the satisfying ending to this story. Let's just go ahead and start flipping cards and consulting the labyrinth prompt tables. Oh, I guess first we should flip for the labyrinth look. Ooh. Okay, that is a King of Clubs, which says Rook Husk. Okay. Fitting. We probably don't even realize it until we are halfway through that we are in the middle of a colossal rook. First room, Jack of Hearts. Colors do not matter in the Labyrinth Chambers table, so a Jack just says, this is a hazard room. The walls are closing in, or a boulder is rolling towards you. You need a combat score of 1 to survive. We just need to beat 1 card with our combat score, so we typically flip 4 cards for our combat score. I think we take those first. We get a 4, a king, and 2 7s. So with a king, there's nothing we can't beat. We flip a 6 and easily overcome it. Let's think about what that might be, though. The hazard of this first room. I actually kind of love the idea, maybe, because the king that we used was a King of Hearts, which is a magical attack. And while Sybil herself doesn't have any magic, Rookling Revolving has magic, Rookrot Fella has magic, I guess we do have Rookrot magic. I kind of love the idea that this hazard is maybe spectral in nature. It's almost like alarm wires. Sybil is going to use her Whisperstone and her spear to cut through them in a way that doesn't trigger any of them. Other people coming in here would have no way of dealing with these chains, and touching them would probably do something terrible, but by cutting them, I think Sybil's also in a mindset where there was a thought, Zorn probably was like, let's just avoid them. We can work our way around them, walk around them, we don't have to touch them. And Sybil said, no, I want them to know I'm coming. And she just cuts through them, slicing through the first room of the labyrinth. Our second card is a 6. This is a Lichen Garden Room. Okay. This says, draw 3 cards. If they are all the same color, you are now infected with Rookrot. Well, we already have Rookrot, but I guess this could affect Rookling Revolving, if that's the case. But already we have a Jack of Diamonds, an Ace of Clubs, and a 9 of Spades, so they are not the same. And that means that we do not catch Rookrot. But it's interesting that there's a Lichen Garden Room down here when we're looking for spectral rooks, but I guess that's just part of what it is down here. Our next card is a 9. 9 says there is a medium lichen rook with a combat score of 3, which I think just means we're still in this garden room. This colossal rook husk is so large that medium rooks fit in here and wander easily. So, alright, we still have 7 cards left in our labyrinth, but let's go ahead and flip our 4 cards for our next combat against this Lichen Rook. A 3 of clubs, a Queen of Diamonds, a Jack of Clubs, and a 2 of clubs against this Rook, and it starts with a 10 of diamonds. Oh, we have our fancy advanced combat rules, but I've already flipped the first card for the Rook, so we're not going to engage with them here. Probably do it for our final battle, though. So we are going to defeat this 10 of diamonds with our Queen of Diamonds, and that is a critical hit, which means that it's only going to flip 1 more card, which is, ooh, interesting, which is a King of Spades. But our Spectral Spear gives +4 to clubs, which technically makes a Jack stronger than a King. If we follow those rules, I'm going to do so and say that we breeze through this combat encounter with this Lichen Rook. And I'm sorry that I am not diving into the details of it, but I kind of love the idea that if we think of this, this is Sybil on a warpath. We've seen Sybil frustrated pretty much this entire time. She fell down to the dungeons. She's been having to babysit, in her words, Rooklings. But this one Rookling has made such an impression on her that when it's gone and taken, we see Sybil in a whole new way. And this woman is pushing herself far beyond her normal physical bounds, but she is just furious. And I think we even see Zorn and the other 2 Rooklings. The other 2 Rooklings understand that she's doing this for Rooklings, and they are there helping her every stage of the way, right? That Queen of Diamonds we used as a creative attack, I think that her friends are helping set her up, but they also know that, you know, she's not playing it safe at the moment, so they're helping where they can. After that Lichen Room, we get a Queen for the next card of our labyrinth, which says a locked door. you will need a key to move past this room. Oh, we were supposed to draw an item if we beat that Lichen Rook, and I flip a 6, which just says it is a treasure, so we don't have a key. So we don't have a key, and I do have a dead end because I did not make any other ways to get around here. Did we ever buy more items to get around stuff? No, and we don't have our phase stone anymore to phase through walls. But you know what? That's not going to stop the Rooksmith that is Sybil, because we have Inventor job pack cards, which I have unfortunately forgotten for a lot of this series, but 3 of the cards we have are a winch, a pulley system, and a claw, which I believe we can fashion into some kind of leverage system that can break open this lock in this door. So I will get rid of these 3 cards, and we are going to say that Sybil creates something, and she says, no, this is not where I'm going to stop. This is not going to stop me. We see her pull out the claw, and this colossal rook husk is so large that this door is big enough that she can kind of wedge the claw in, and maybe even, like a lockpick, she can maybe lift one of the pieces or, you know, engage one part of it. Then she ties this to the winch and the cable that's part of it, and then puts the other end on the pulley system, and we just see her and Zorn and the Rooklings all using all of their powers to just crank this pulley system until eventually we hear that groan and crack of something as the door opens. The next room is an ace. This is a treasure chest, and this is, we just get to draw an item, which is a 5, which is a key. Wow, that's just rude. Labyrinth, that's super rude. But now we have a key, so if we come to any other locked doors, I think Sybil looks at it and just kind of shakes her head, and she's like, I'm so done with this place. She's going to flip her next one, which is another 6, which is the oh no, that's a Lichen Garden. Oh man, I thought it was another locked door, but another Lichen Garden. Interesting. Maybe this is, so maybe what this was is this was a locked door to a room with a treasure chest, and then I think maybe it is like a spiral staircase that goes down, and maybe it was even open to the next floor, or it goes up, right? And it's a continuation of the garden. Maybe this is like the gut biome of the colossal rook husk that we are currently in. Is there any challenge in the Lichen room? Just the check to see if we contract rook rot, which we do not, because we've gone black, red, red on our cards. So we go to the next room, which is a 9. There is another medium Lichen rook. Isn't that exactly how it happened last time? That's crazy. Okay, well, this rook husk and place where the spectral chains seem to be leading. And you know what? Let's just retcon and say that the entire time that Sybil has been walking through, she can see the chain and the spectral rook as it is pulling itself, guiding her in this direction. We get 4 cards for our combat. Queen of clubs, 7 of diamonds, 4 of clubs, 8 of diamonds. And then we get 3 cards for the Lichen Rook. Its first card it flips is a 2 of hearts. We could beat that with anything, so we are just going to slam it with our weapon, which is our spectral spear, and Sybil is just fury at this point. I think that she's even maybe scaring Zorn and the other Rooklings. Then we get an 8 of hearts, which is actually reduced to a 6 of hearts because we have our engraved cuirass, so we can beat that with our 7 of diamonds as the group all begin going to town on this poor Rookling. The next card is a 10 of clubs, which we beat with our Queen of clubs. And these Lichen Rooks just do not stand a chance at this point against Sybil, not only in everything she has acquired down here and learned, but just in her relentless determination to rescue her friend. The next room is a 7. This is a rigged treasure chest. It says, draw a card if it's red, then the mechanism hurts you. It is not. That was a Queen of Spades, so we get to draw an item, which is a 5, which is another key. All right, and we are approaching the last room. I think that we are even warned about this by the Spectral Rook as it pulls its chain and it is taught beyond this last room. We get a 5, which is another medium lichen rook just guarding this door. Well, okay, I guess so. Here goes. We get a jack of spades, a 4 of hearts, a 10 of spades, and an ace of diamonds. First up, we're up against its ace of spades, so we can beat that with any of our cards, but I will beat it with the 10 of spades because that makes it a critical success with an unarmed attack. And that means we just have to flip one more card for this lichen rook, which is an 8 of spades, which we also beat with our jack of spades. Sybil doesn't even bother to wield her weapon on this one. She just uses her arm, and she already has rook rot, so this lichen rook does not scare her at all. It is standing in the way of the next room where her friend has been pulled. And at this point, I think we not only see the spectral rook and the chain it is holding leading to the next room, but we actually see phasing in and out of the tunnel and the walls and the ceiling are the chains of countless spectral rooks that are emerging from whatever lies beyond this door. And Sybil just walks forward, and this lichen rook tries its best to slam down on her, but she uses her arm to just stab into every section where lichen has grown in cracks of the rock, and it just pries them apart, and she just breaks this rook into pieces on her own with her arm. And then she stands up as it is twitching in pieces on the ground before her, and she turns back to Zorn and the Rooklings, and she just looks at them and she says, "Let's go get our friend, and then I'm getting out of here." We're going to open the last door. I got a king of diamonds in the last room, which says an NPC. This says another adventurer stranded in the labyrinth, but I don't think that's what this is. Let's go ahead and flip on the Guardian's table, but I'm probably going to totally wing this one. Yeah, I flipped a 5, but I think instead I'm going to use that king to do double duty. And it is not only an NPC in this room, and that NPC is our ice rookling friend in spectral form. The only rookling here attached to a chain. He is fighting, he is attempting to phase in and out, he is attempting to wail against this spectral chain, and there are more and more chains in this room as Sybil enters. The king of diamonds that I flipped for the last room is also going to represent the guardian within it. And it is not exactly as it says in the book, but the book says on a king, a labyrinth spider. A huge 8-legged rook spider with a combat score of 6. However, I think this is less rook spider and more the chains are a net that the spider has woven throughout the dungeons itself. It is a spectral rook spider. It has webs everywhere. At certain times, it's not rook rot, it's something else. You might not even know you walk through it, but as soon as you do, you feel the pull to go to one of the places where this spectral rook can get you. And once it has you in its web, you are its to play with. This is where all these spectral rooks have come from. The husks that are strewn throughout the dungeons are just husks of what was, and now the spectral version is what the spider sends out to spread its web. We are going to flip for a combat. This has a combat score of 6, so it gets 12 cards in its stack, and we only get 8 for ours, because we're going to double our combat score, and we're going to use the advanced combat rules for this final fight. We are going to use our potion of strength that we have never used to give us +1 to all of our cards for this combat, and let's see what we get when we flip our 8 cards. A 4 of clubs, a king of hearts, a 2 of hearts, a 10 of spades, an ace of spades, a 7 of diamonds, a 7 of clubs, and an 8 of hearts. Not a great array. Oh boy. And we're going to make a stack of 12 cards for this enemy spider. Here we go. walking into this final chamber, it is almost like a web extends from the center of this room. It is a dark dead end to a tunnel. There are spiders in nature they're called trapdoor spiders, and they create these little burrows that they then hide, basically camouflage their ambush points from. And I imagine that's very much how this is working. And then the chains have just extended throughout the entirety of the dungeons. Because it is a rook spider, it is this castle-like contraption of 8 legs, and the chains are like the drawbridge, right? The portcullis and the drawbridge, the chains that would lift these up, have just been repurposed to spread throughout the dungeons. And Sybil walks in, and Zorn and the Rooklings stare up at this enormous web and terrifying presence in front of them, and Sybil sees her small ice Rookling friend in its phased form, and she's going to rush forward. The first thing she's going to try and do is cut him free. The first card for the phase spider is a 6 of hearts. Now, I can immediately win this with the 8 of hearts, which would be a critical success and reduce the number of cards we have. Don't forget, though, we have our special techniques, and I don't know if we want to use those instead, because we have Trip and Trap and Stonewall Defense. I just described Sybil going on the offensive, and I think that we've described magic attacks being the magic of her spectral spear, so that is what we're going to do. We're going to use our 8 of hearts to just rush forward aggressively, and we are going to cut through the chains that are attached to our small friend. And we do see for the first time our ice Rookling friend post Rookling Forge transformation. They look a lot like they did with their icy spikes and things like that, but now they almost have this ethereal phase about them, and they've changed in a way that suggests that they now exist half in and out of these 2 planes. Let's see what the card we would have gotten away with. We got rid of an 8 of clubs for this spectral spider, so that's good. It has lost its connection to what could have been a potential new puppet or something for it. All right, it is going to lash out. Its next card is a 10 of diamonds, which is a creative attack. It begins to skitter along the walls of this cavern, but as it does so, these spectral chains actually lash out at our party. We do not have a diamond that can overcome this, but let's see if we have maybe a Stonewall Defense that can protect us from it. Ooh, we have a magic attack called Deflect for Stonewall Defense, which says, if this attack clashes or wins, you can use this enemy's attack card against their next attack card in their stack. A 10 is pretty good, but that would require us to use our King of Hearts, which is our best remaining card, but it might buy us a whole turn. I'm going to try it. I think that these spectral chains in the form of a web are lashing out towards Zorn and the Rooklings, but Sybil rushes over, and actually this is a magic attack. I think maybe it's the Ice Rookling, now in its new phase form, that uses magic to deflect these chains back at the spider herself. Let's flip her next card. Oh no, it is a Queen of Hearts. However, we have a Engraved Cuirass, which makes enemy cards 2 less. Do we think that that changes this Queen of Hearts into a 10, which would make this a clash? I think that makes sense. I think that's good. I think the unexpected creativity of the Rookling, our new phase ice Rookling, we're going to have to come up with a name for this type of Rookling, or, you know what, finally give this Rookling a name. I think that the magic deflects it, sends these back, which is a creative attack. The spider rook is attempting to go after us, but when it sees its webs flung back at it, I think that it's going to panic, and it will result in just a clash. We have not taken a single wound yet, and we are through quite a few cards from their stack. I think we've gotten through 5, right? Oof, just 4. There's still 8 cards remaining in their stack, and we have 6 in our hand. Okay, well, now that that attack did not work out, it is going to lash out again. Oh my goodness, a 10 of hearts for this one, and that is a magic attack. I think this is the webs begin to constrict around us, and we all have to reposition ourselves to stay safe without these touching us. And let's see if we have a card, maybe, that could work for this. The 10 of hearts is reduced to an 8, effectively. And we can maybe use... Ooh, I like this. We're up against a spider. Naturally and metaphorically one of the greatest trap setters in nature, right? And this rook is no different. This spider is attempting to trip and trap us with their web, but this is currently down to an 8. I'm going to use our 7 of clubs, which for us gets a +4 bonus because it is using our spectral spear. And we're going to use this to win this, and we're going to use our trip and trap, which says snare. If this clashes or wins, choose a suit other than the enemy's current attack, so hearts, and that next attack will be at -3. I'm going to choose spades because red cards are already at -2, and we're pretty good with clubs, so the next spades will be at -3. Oh, and all of our cards get +1. I totally forgot about that. That may matter in the near future. Let's see what the next card is. It is the 9 of diamonds, which reduces to a 7 of diamonds, and we have a 7 of diamonds, which we can turn into an 8 of diamonds to make this a success. Ooh, that's actually exactly what's going to happen. It turns it into a critical success. The snare that we set is these webs begin constricting and forcing us all into a very small area where this rook feels like it has the advantage on us. We are all huddling together. It is Sybil, Zorn, and the 2 rooklings, as well as now our little ice phase rookling who is back on our side. We are going to use trip and trap. We're going to use our snare attack, and what's going to happen is as these chains and the web begin to go around us, we're going to use our rook rot friend to explode out and create this barrier, and then we're going to all stay within the barrier and run with it to pull all of the web, the chains that are attempting to constrict us, underneath. And it almost does a thing where if they follow us, it's going to go underneath the rook spider itself and maybe do that kind of thing where it goes underneath and it flips it over. Then we're going to use our creative attack to get on the other side of it where it wasn't expecting us and critically hit it to remove a 5 of spades from its next attack. All right, we have 4 cards in hand. It has 5 cards left in its stack, and somehow miraculously, thanks to our advanced combat training, we have taken no damage at all in this fight. Sybil is frustrated though because she has yet to land an actual blow on this rook spider who's been weaving a web, and she still doesn't know why these spectral rooks can communicate with her. Her Whisper Stone gave her basically a neutrality or a kinship or some kind of bond with the spectral rooks, but she hasn't been able to do anything with it since. All of these chains are still out and around the entire dungeons. She wishes there was a way to call them all home to help her fight this spider that has ensnared and has been using them as bait throughout the entire dungeons. Let's see what her next card is. Oh, there it is, the King of Clubs. Okay, this is one where we are going to get hurt because we have no cards that can even remotely deal with this. We're just going to throw our Ace of Spades at this and take a brutal hit because I think this is, I just described Sybil's patience beginning to run low. As the ball of defense, our Rookrot Rookling and its exploded shields rolls by, and that is repositioning our group. Sybil stops, and they keep rolling on to an area of safety, but Sybil stops directly underneath this rook spider, and she is just going to stab up at it. She actually hefts her spear and then grabs it with her arm and then uses that extended reach to try and hit it. But with this weapon attack of the spider, she doesn't know. A huge stinger comes down and knocks the spear out of her hands, clattering to the ground a little ways away, and she falls to the ground. She is nervously flailing and trying to get back to her feet to get there. Let's see what the next card of the spiders is. That is a 3 of diamonds, which reduces to a 1 of diamonds. We have a 2 of hearts, which we are going to say is our Phase Ice Rookling's buddy, and he is going to rush out of the shields as well and use his phasing ability to fling the spear to Sybil, who's going to get it up in time to stab, and we see the first recoil of this spider, and Sybil realizes this thing is not as tough as it looks. It is big, it is clever, but she stabbed at one of the legs, and they're not very well secured. It is not the sturdiest of rooks that she's been up against. Its next card is going to be a 7 of spades, which we did say gets -3 to its next thing, so that's a 4 of spades. Ooh, do I take a real chance here? Yes, I do. We are going to use our 10 of spades to make this a critical success as Sybil continues pushing the advantage. Using her arm to extend her reach with the spear, she starts swinging it around and she is severing legs left and right. With the critical hit, we get rid of a 7 of hearts, and now it is down to 1 card apiece. Our 1 card, everybody, is a 4 of clubs, which is effectively an 8 of clubs. It is a weapon attack. We have our spear in hand, which can cut through these chains, which again, I guess we have been doing. Sybil has been slicing through these chains. Let's see. The last card for the Spectral Spider Rook is a 2 of diamonds, which stands no chance against our effectively 8 of clubs. As Sybil is swinging this around, I think the Ice Rook comes and stands next to her as it loses its grip on a wall and begins moving around its spectral chains. Its chains are beginning to snap and flail around like the tension has just been released out of all of them. It is trying to crawl back into its corner, and Sybil is going to step forward and she is going to hold her spear in 2 hands. She is going to, one by one, pluck every single one of the chains from the source as this spider is retreating and retreating, and then backed into a corner, looking desperate. It looks like it might lash out one last time, but Sybil just buries her spectral spear into it. It spasms a few times and then grinds to a halt and silence. Sybil pulls out the spear, looks at her little Rookling friend, looks back at the spider, and says, "I don't like when people take advantage of others." She kneels down, she looks at her ice-faced Rookling friend. She says, "Are you okay?" And it nods. And it actually walks past her to where all of these spectral chains have been cut. And it begins actually like picking them up, and it can interact with them. Now our ice Rookling friend can hold these chains, and it begins pulling them. And Sybil sees that her Rookling friend is not just grabbing them and pulling them. It seems like something pulses from his icy hands down every single one of these chains when he grabs them. It's not long before Zorn and the other 2 Rooklings walk over and sigh in relief as Sybil and the Ice Phase Rookling are okay. But it's not long before this entire labyrinth is full of spectral rooks who surround everyone in the room, and Sybil looks at all of them and they all nod their heads, and she says, "So what do we do now?" Her ice Rookling friend has pointed out something in the spider rook itself, and Sybil sees it, and it is basically the spinneret for these chains. Sybil nods, looks at all of the spectral rooks, then she looks at her Rookling friend and she says, "Are you going to be okay?" And it just shrugs, but it points at it. And she says, "Okay." And she stabs it. And all of the spectral rooks fade away. And that's where we're going to end this episode. There will be one more episode of Colossal Dungeons in 2 weeks. and I hope that you are enjoying it. I hope that you've enjoyed this crazy ride we've gone on. Once again, if you are playing the dungeons or plan to play the dungeons, none of what I just said is canon, so you can enjoy the book as presented in its glory. Thank you for listening. You know what to do. Find me on the internet. Rate and review if you haven't already on your podcatcher of choice. Reach out to me at reneplaysgamespod@gmail.com. And until next time, don't let anybody take your friends away.